The morning sun cast long shadows across the ceremonial courtyard of Buckingham Palace. Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his dress blue uniform one final time, feeling the weight of his marine dress sword at his side. Today marked the first time in British royal history that a United States Marine would participate in the changing of the guard ceremony alongside the Queen's Guard. The exchange program between the two elite military units had been months in planning, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what was about to unfold. Marcus had earned his place through exceptional service in Afghanistan and Iraq. His commanding officers selected him not just for his military prowess, but for his ability to represent American military excellence on an international stage. Standing 6 feet 2 inches tall with the bearing that only comes from years of discipline and combat experience, Marcus embodied everything the Marine Corps represented. His uniform was pressed to perfection, his brass polished to mirror shine, and his mind focused on executing every movement with precision. Across the courtyard, Guardsman James Wellington of the Grenadier Guards prepared for what he assumed would be routine ceremony. James came from a family with 3 generations of Royal Guard service. His grandfather had stood watch during World War II. His father had served during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and now James carried on the tradition. At 24 years old, he had already completed 2 tours of duty and earned recognition as one of the most disciplined members of his regiment. The morning briefing had been straightforward. Marcus would observe the ceremony, learn the protocols, and gradually integrate into future ceremonies over his 6-month assignment to London. The Royal Guard prided itself on tradition dating back centuries, and every movement, every step, every gesture had been refined over generations. The bearskin caps, the red tunics, the precise timing, everything represented the unbroken chain of British military heritage. As the crowds began gathering along the palace railings, tourists and locals alike buzzed with excitement about witnessing this historic moment. Camera phones were raised, tour guides explained the significance to their groups, and children pressed against the iron gates for better views. The media had covered the story extensively, billing it as a symbol of the special relationship between Britain and America. Marcus took his position at the designated observation point, his trained eyes studying every aspect of the ceremony. The precision was remarkable. Each guardsman moved as if connected by invisible strings, their timing perfect, their bearing immaculate. The sergeant major's commands echoed across the courtyard with crisp authority that had been honed over decades of service. James felt the familiar surge of pride as he prepared for inspection. This ceremony had played out thousands of times, but today felt different. The presence of the American Marine added an element of scrutiny that made every detail more important. The international media attention meant that any mistake would be broadcast around the world. The first sign of tension came during the initial formation. Marcus noticed a subtle difference in the positioning protocol from what he had studied in the briefing materials. His military training had taught him to observe everything, to note discrepancies that others might miss. The guardsmen were forming up with a spacing that seemed slightly off from the documented procedures. James caught the American Marine's questioning glance and felt a flash of irritation. The ceremony was proceeding exactly as it should, exactly as it had for generations. The slight adjustment in formation was intentional, a weather-related modification that any experienced guardsman would recognize. The fact that the Marine seemed confused suggested he had not done his homework properly. As the ceremony progressed, Marcus found himself studying not just the movements but the attitudes of the guardsmen. There was something in their bearing that suggested they viewed his presence as more than just observation. Several guardsmen shot glances in his direction that seemed to carry a challenge. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken competition. The crowd pressed closer to the railings as the ceremony reached its midpoint. Digital cameras clicked constantly, capturing every moment of this historic event. Social media posts were already spreading across the internet, with commentary ranging from celebration of international cooperation to debates about the mixing of military traditions. James executed each movement with extra precision, knowing that his performance was being evaluated not just by his superiors but by international observers. The weight of representing British military excellence pressed down on him like a physical force. Every step had to be perfect. Every turn had to demonstrate the superiority of Royal Guard training. Marcus maintained his position, but his soldiers' instincts were picking up on the subtle currents of tension flowing through the ceremony. He had expected formality, but there was something more here. The guardsmen were not just performing a ceremony. They were making a statement. Their movements seemed designed to demonstrate complexity and precision that would be impossible for an outsider to master. The turning point came during the presentation of arms. The Royal Guard's rifle drill was legendary for its complexity and precision. Each movement required years of practice to execute properly. The rifles moved in perfect synchronization, creating a visual display that had impressed observers for generations. As the guardsmen executed the drill, Marcus noticed subtle variations in timing that seemed designed to test his observation skills. It was as if they were presenting him with a puzzle, challenging him to identify the intricacies of their craft. The message was clear without being spoken. This was their domain, and mastery required more than a few months of preparation. James felt the intensity of the moment as he performed movements that had become second nature through countless hours of practice. The rifle felt like an extension of his body, each motion flowing seamlessly into the next. He was aware of the Marine's scrutiny and wanted to demonstrate that British military precision remained unmatched. The crowd sensed the electricity in the air without understanding its source. What they were witnessing appeared to be a flawless ceremonial display, but underneath ran currents of professional pride and national identity that transformed routine into competition. Marcus recognized the challenge being presented. His Marine training had prepared him for many situations, but this was different. This was not about combat skills or tactical knowledge. This was about tradition, precision, and cultural heritage. The guardsmen were not just performing their duties. They were defending their reputation. The ceremony continued with increasing intensity. Every movement seemed amplified. Every gesture carried additional meaning. The usually routine changing of the guard had become a demonstration of military excellence that transcended its ceremonial purpose. Neither side had spoken a word of challenge, but everyone present could feel the tension building. As the first hour progressed, it became clear that this was more than a simple introduction to British military protocol. Marcus was being tested, evaluated, and perhaps even intimidated by the finest soldiers the Royal Guard had to offer. The question was whether an American Marine, regardless of his training and experience, could measure up to centuries of British military tradition. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge both men's understanding of military excellence and national pride. What had begun as a diplomatic gesture was evolving into something far more significant, something that would test the limits of professional respect and personal honor. The morning sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows across the courtyard, but the tension continued to build with each passing moment. The second hour of the ceremony brought unexpected developments that no one had anticipated. As the formal changing of the guard concluded, Sergeant Marcus Thompson found himself invited to participate in what the Royal Guard termed a friendly demonstration of military drill techniques. The invitation came from Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, the commanding officer overseeing the ceremony, and was delivered with the kind of polite formality that made refusal impossible without causing international embarrassment. Marcus understood immediately that this was no spontaneous gesture of goodwill. The timing, the formal nature of the invitation, and the barely concealed anticipation in the guardsmen's faces told him this had been planned from the beginning. The exchange program briefings had mentioned nothing about active participation beyond observation, but declining would suggest that American Marines were unwilling to demonstrate their capabilities alongside their British counterparts. The crowd, initially preparing to disperse after the ceremony's conclusion, sensed that something unusual was happening and pressed closer to the railings. Word spread quickly through the gathered tourists and media representatives that they were about to witness something unprecedented. Camera phones that had been lowered were raised again, and television news crews adjusted their positions for better angles. Guardsmen, James Wellington felt his pulse quicken as he received the subtle signal from his commanding officer. The plan they had discussed in the barracks the night before was being implemented. It was not meant to embarrass the American Marine, they had told themselves, but rather to demonstrate why the Royal Guard's reputation for precision and discipline remained unmatched after centuries of service. The demonstration began with basic drill movements. Marcus was asked to perform standard Marine Corps ceremonial drill, which he executed with the precision expected of a career military professional. His movements were sharp, controlled, and confident. The crowd applauded politely, appreciating the display of American military bearing. Then came the British response. James and 3 other guardsmen performed a rifle drill sequence that showcased the complexity and artistry of Royal Guard ceremonial training. The movements were intricate, requiring perfect timing and coordination between all participants. Rifles spun through the air in patterns that seemed to defy physics, caught and manipulated with casual expertise that spoke of thousands of hours of practice. Marcus watched with professional appreciation and growing understanding. This was not a friendly demonstration. It was a gauntlet being thrown down. The Royal Guard was making a statement about the difference between military competence and military artistry. They were showing him and everyone present what true mastery looked like. The crowd's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Applause erupted as the guardsmen completed their display with movements so precise they seemed choreographed by machines rather than human beings. The message was clear. This level of perfection was the standard that the Royal Guard maintained every single day. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison approached Marcus with another polite invitation. Would the American Marine care to attempt the basic sequence they had just demonstrated? It was phrased as a learning opportunity, a chance for cultural exchange, but everyone present understood the real nature of the challenge. Marcus felt the weight of representing not just the Marine Corps but American military capability in general. Every eye was upon him, from the curious tourists to the international media to his British counterparts who had just set an impossibly high standard. The smart move would be to decline gracefully, to acknowledge the complexity of the display and defer to British expertise. Instead, Marcus stepped forward and requested a rifle. The silence that fell over the courtyard was profound. Even the traffic noise from the surrounding streets seemed to diminish as Marcus took the unfamiliar British rifle and tested its weight and balance. It was different from the weapons he had trained with, heavier and with a different center of gravity, but his years of experience allowed him to adapt quickly. James felt a mixture of respect and concern as he watched the Marine familiarize himself with the weapon. The American's confidence was evident, but confidence alone would not be sufficient for what they had just demonstrated. The sequence required muscle memory developed over years of repetitive practice. Attempting it without proper training would likely result in embarrassment or, worse, injury. Marcus began slowly, breaking down the movements into their component parts. His approach was methodical, analytical, treating the drill sequence like a tactical problem to be solved rather than an artistic performance to be mastered. He isolated each movement, practiced the timing, and gradually built up the complexity. The crowd watched in fascination as the Marine transformed the demonstration into an impromptu training session. His approach was different from the guardsman's, more pragmatic and less ceremonial, but no less impressive in its own way. He was reverse engineering centuries of tradition through pure analytical skill and physical discipline. James found himself torn between wanting the American to fail and genuinely admiring his approach. The Marine was not trying to replicate the guardsman's style. He was creating his own version based on his understanding of the underlying mechanics. It was like watching someone translate between languages, finding equivalent expressions rather than exact duplicates. After 20 minutes of practice, Marcus indicated that he was ready to attempt the sequence. The Royal Guard formed up to observe, their faces masks of professional neutrality that concealed intense curiosity about what would happen next. This was uncharted territory for everyone involved. Marcus executed the sequence with competence that shocked even himself. He made mistakes, certainly his timing was off in several places, and his movements lacked the fluid grace of the guardsman, but he completed the drill without dropping the rifle or injuring anyone. For a first attempt with an unfamiliar weapon and no formal training in the sequence, it was a remarkable performance. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some applauded enthusiastically, impressed by the Marine's adaptability and determination. Others seemed disappointed that he had not failed more spectacularly. The guardsmen themselves appeared unsure how to respond to this unexpected demonstration of American military flexibility. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison stepped forward to offer congratulations on a fine attempt, but Marcus was not finished. He requested permission to demonstrate a Marine Corps' rifle drill sequence that he thought might interest the guardsmen. The polite way he phrased the request made it impossible to refuse without seeming discourteous. What Marcus performed next was not the elaborate ceremonial artistry of the Royal Guard, but something that spoke to a different kind of military excellence. His drill emphasized speed, efficiency, and combat readiness. The movements were sharp and purposeful, designed for battlefield effectiveness rather than parade ground beauty. The guardsmen watched with professional interest as Marcus demonstrated techniques they had never seen before. His style was more aggressive, more obviously military rather than ceremonial. Where their drill emphasized precision and tradition, his emphasized adaptability and practical application. James realized that he was witnessing a fundamental difference in military philosophy. The Royal Guard's approach valued perfection within established parameters, maintaining standards that had been refined over centuries. The Marines' approach valued innovation and adaptation, finding new solutions to challenges as they arose. The demonstration concluded with both sides having proven their points. The Royal Guard had shown that their standards of precision and ceremonial excellence remained unmatched. The American Marine had shown that military competence could bridge cultural and training gaps through determination and analytical skill. But the tension had not been resolved. It had been transformed into something deeper. What had begun as a challenge to American military capability had evolved into a profound question about different approaches to military excellence. Neither side had clearly won or lost, but both had been forced to reconsider their assumptions about what it meant to be an elite soldier. The crowd began to disperse, but many lingered, sensing that they had witnessed something significant. The formal ceremony was over, but the real test of these two military cultures was just beginning. The question was no longer whether an American Marine could match British precision, but whether these two very different approaches to military excellence could coexist or would continue to clash. As the afternoon sun cast new shadows across the courtyard, both Marcus and James understood that their interaction was far from over. The stage had been set for a deeper exploration of military pride, national identity, and professional respect. That would challenge everything they thought they knew about their respective services. The following morning brought an unexpected summons that would change everything. Sergeant Marcus Thompson received orders to report to the Wellington Barracks at 600 hours for what was described as advanced cultural exchange activities. The formal language could not disguise the fact that yesterday's impromptu demonstration had created ripples that reached the highest levels of both military establishments. Guardsman James Wellington arrived at the same time, having received similar orders. The two men encountered each other at the barracks entrance, and for the first time, they made direct eye contact without the buffer of ceremony or crowd. The moment was charged with unresolved tension from the previous day's events. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison was waiting for them in the main briefing room, along with Colonel Patricia Hayes from the United States Embassy's military attaché office. The presence of senior officers from both sides indicated that yesterday's demonstration had been viewed as more than casual entertainment. Colonel Hayes spoke first, her tone carefully neutral but her words carrying unmistakable weight. The exchange program had been designed to foster cooperation and understanding between allied military units. However, yesterday's events had attracted international media attention that was being interpreted in various ways by different audiences. Some commentators were praising the demonstration as an example of healthy military competition and cultural exchange. Others were suggesting that it represented deeper tensions between American and British military approaches. A few were questioning whether the exchange program was achieving its intended diplomatic objectives. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison added that while both participants had conducted themselves with appropriate military bearing, the spontaneous nature of yesterday's demonstration had created an unofficial competition that neither military establishment had authorized or anticipated. The question now was how to proceed in a manner that served both military and diplomatic interests. Marcus and James listened in silence as their superiors outlined the situation they had created. Neither had intended to generate international controversy, but their professional pride and competitive instincts had transformed a ceremonial observation into something far more significant. The solution proposed by the senior officers was unprecedented. Rather than attempting to minimize or ignore what had happened, they wanted to formalize the competition. A structured series of challenges would be designed to showcase both military traditions while allowing for direct comparison of different approaches to military excellence. The proposal called for a week-long series of events that would test various aspects of military skill and knowledge: physical fitness, weapons proficiency, tactical knowledge, ceremonial drill, leadership capabilities, and adaptability would all be evaluated through carefully designed challenges that would be fair to both military traditions. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as the scope of the proposal became clear. This was not going to be a casual demonstration or cultural exchange activity. This would be a comprehensive evaluation of everything he represented as a United States Marine, measured against one of the finest soldiers the British military could produce. James experienced a similar surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. The informal challenge of yesterday had become a formal test that would be observed and evaluated by senior military leaders from both countries. The stakes had escalated far beyond personal or unit pride. This was about national military reputation. The first challenge would be physical fitness, using standardized tests that both military services would recognize as fair measures of conditioning and endurance. The second would involve weapons proficiency with both American and British systems, testing adaptability and technical skill. Tactical knowledge would be evaluated through written examinations and practical problem-solving exercises. Ceremonial drill would feature prominently, with both participants required to master elements of each other's traditions. Leadership would be tested through exercises involving junior personnel from both services. Finally, adaptability would be measured through unexpected challenges designed to test mental flexibility and creative problem-solving under pressure. Colonel Hayes emphasized that this was not intended as a winner-take-all competition, but rather as a comprehensive evaluation of different military cultures and training methodologies. The results would be used to improve future exchange programs and enhance cooperation between allied forces. Despite the diplomatic framing, everyone present understood the real stakes involved. This had become a test of military systems, training philosophies, and national approaches to producing elite soldiers. The participants would be representing far more than themselves or their individual units. The week that followed became the most intense military evaluation that either Marcus or James had ever experienced. The physical fitness challenges pushed both men to their limits, revealing that their different training approaches had produced comparable but distinct capabilities. Marcus excelled at endurance and functional fitness. James demonstrated superior precision and controlled strength. Weapons proficiency testing revealed fascinating differences in training philosophy. Marcus adapted quickly to British weapons systems but approached them with American tactical doctrines. James struggled initially with American weapons but applied British precision training methods that ultimately proved highly effective. The tactical knowledge evaluation surprised both participants and observers. Marcus demonstrated superior adaptability and creative problem-solving, finding unconventional solutions to complex scenarios. James showed deeper understanding of tactical principles and historical precedents. applying lessons learned from centuries of British military experience. Ceremonial drill became the most watched and discussed element of the entire week. Both men had to master elements of each other's traditions, learning not just movements but the cultural and historical significance behind them. The exercise forced them to understand their own traditions more deeply by seeing them through foreign eyes. Marcus found himself appreciating the artistry and precision of British ceremonial drill while recognizing that its complexity served purposes beyond mere display. The movements embodied values of discipline, attention to detail, and collective achievement that were central to British military identity. James discovered that American military ceremonies emphasized different values: adaptability, individual excellence within team structures, and practical application of skills. The apparently simpler American approach actually concealed sophisticated understanding of leadership dynamics and mission effectiveness. The leadership challenge proved most revealing of all. Both men were assigned mixed teams of British and American junior personnel and tasked with accomplishing complex objectives under time pressure. Their different approaches to leadership created fascinating contrasts in methodology and results. Marcus led through encouragement and empowerment, drawing out individual capabilities and fostering creative solutions. His teams showed high initiative and adaptability, but sometimes lacked coordination and precision. James led through clear direction and systematic approaches, creating teams that functioned with remarkable efficiency and precision, but sometimes struggled with unexpected developments. The final challenge, adaptability, was designed to test mental flexibility under extreme pressure. Both participants were presented with scenarios that had no standard solutions, requiring them to synthesize their training, experience, and cultural understanding to develop effective responses. As the week concluded, senior officers from both military services gathered to review the results and evaluate what had been learned. The numbers and scores were interesting, but the real value lay in the insights gained about different approaches to military excellence. Colonel Hayes delivered the final assessment to both participants and a small audience of military leaders and diplomatic personnel. The evaluation had revealed that both military systems produced exceptional soldiers, but through different methods that emphasized different aspects of military capability. Neither participant had clearly dominated all categories, and neither military system had proven superior across all dimensions of evaluation. Instead, the week had demonstrated that military excellence could be achieved through multiple pathways, each with distinct advantages and limitations. Marcus and James stood at attention as the assessment concluded, both understanding that they had participated in something unprecedented. They had not just competed against each other. They had served as representatives of their respective military cultures in an evaluation that would influence future cooperation between allied forces. The tension that had started the entire sequence of events had been resolved not through victory or defeat, but through mutual respect earned through comprehensive testing. Both men had proven themselves worthy of their reputations, and both military systems had demonstrated their effectiveness in producing elite soldiers. As they shook hands at the conclusion of the ceremony, Marcus and James understood that they had helped write a new chapter in military diplomacy. Their competition had evolved into collaboration, their rivalry into mutual respect, and their tension into a foundation for enhanced cooperation between allied forces. The crowds that had gathered to witness conflict had instead observed the birth of a new model for military exchange that would influence training and cooperation programs for years to come. What began with unspoken challenge had concluded with unprecedented understanding between two proud military traditions.